What's going on, Workforce? Brian and Chris here, and if you guys have been following all the Final Fantasy XIV debate and discussion, that's essentially what this video is going to be about. The TLDR of all of this is that we've seen Yoshi P come out and reaffirm his stance against add-ons within the Final Fantasy XIV community. He's talked about looking at the most prosperous add-ons and saying about bringing that functionality into game, so we want to talk about that today. And then also, we've seen even a streamer already get a 10-day suspension, which I would argue a 10-day suspension on a streamer is actually like free promotion. So that's an interesting thing that we could discuss here as well. But anyway, guys, welcome so much to Work to Game. I hope you guys enjoy this video. Sound off with your thoughts below. But Chris, you've been live covering all of this as well. This isn't anything new from a long-term player perspective, but why don't you give everybody the TLDR, especially for those of you who come over from World of Warcraft or other games that have a heavy supported add-on kind of community and mindset. What do you think, Chris?
So this is not a policy change, but specifically for anybody that like Endwalker was their first chance to kind of get into Endgame or watch a lot of Endgame. That is typically when a lot of the add-ons start to show up, is when you hit your version of Endgame and the base tools no longer satisfy you. Sometimes people use it along leveling because they're trying to make it emulate a game that they're more comfortable with. They're doing something to make the UI or something about the game give feedback that another game does offer. And those are, with the exception of, I believe, shaders is the only one they let slide by. Those are against the rules in Final Fantasy. Now, the degree to which they've enforced those over the years has varied. But the biggest of which that you see publicly talked about is DPS meters, but it is not alone in the add-on community. And basically, they don't feel that it needs to be there. They don't feel it fosters the community in the game that they want it to. And when players end up, they download an add-on and they lose their account information, or they have a bad play experience, or it gives them some self-promoted permission to become toxic in some way. They just, in general, don't like these things. And the World First race tends to put a lot of emphasis on very specific aspects of this. Accusations that certain people are cheating, accusations that certain people are breeding the wrong type of behavior, in addition to people promoting and even showing off features that are not available with the base tools of the game, meaning not available to console players, and should not be something, according to the rules, that any players are using. Now, that being said, Brian and I have both used the DPS meter for self-improvement. Yeah. So, we're not calling it out from some, holier than art thou, and neither of us have ever cleared an ultimate. So, it's not that either. But that is kind of the stance that Yoshi P is taking here. And he is coming out to kind of communicate and reiterate and give detail around certain accusations. And has asked that if we do read the post, he's asked that you kind of read the whole thing, because he wants he doesn't want one part of it being taken out of context. And we had a big, long debate today around how certain people feel that this policy has affected them. When we talk about things like various media campaigns and things like that, where people take one part of this and use it to then justify explanation of some other behavior. And it's not meant to be that. It's meant to be one big, cohesive enforcement. I do think that 10-day bans don't really hurt streamers that bad. Most streamers are only streaming this game 2 to maybe 4 days a week. There are some that go more. So a 10-day ban is not 10 streams. For the majority of streamers, it's some number less than 10, because they're not going 10 out of every 10 days. And they tend to have their community rally behind them. They tend to promote, and it tends to be an opportunity of, oh my God, well, now I'm going to have to try Elden Ring, which draws in new players. And then they make a whole thing out of and on this day, I'm coming back. I'm the rebel. I'm putting on my leather jacket and I'm walking into the bar. Look at how awesome I am. And they come back to even bigger numbers than the day they were banned. Yeah, even from a memeing perspective, even them is oh, they deserved it. They get this. You're talking about them, right? They're becoming a part of the conversation. And then the question from a content creator's perspective is all about, are they able to then hold on to that attention? And I usually see when it comes across the board is that there is a residual effect of oh, I was introduced to them through this event, and it turns out I actually really enjoy their personality, especially if they have a great personality. It's oh man, that sucks, and it's oh, but I still love this game and I can't wait to come back. And it is like a promotion in that regards, which is just a weird thing to think about
when it comes down to content creation and what then could Square Enix do. Because a permanent ban would be actually something that hurts them, but you don't want to sit here and be like, well, if you're a content creator and you step barely out of line, you're done. And then like that doesn't help Square Enix or anybody in that regards. But it is this weird question that essentially this video is asking, but no answers, I think, really could come out of it. What do you think, Chris?
Internally, there has been rumors that the punishment and severity of the way these things are implemented is increased based on how public the offense is. So if you're breaking the offense by yourself, you're alone in a corner of the world, and you are doing something that they find out about and, they ban it, that's very different than when you do it and it's directly affecting other players in game, or you are promoting it to streams of hundreds or even thousands of players. Just based on like, how much do we want to dissuade this behavior? Right. So like there is an element of, you request a GM to help you in game, and then you tell that GM that you're doing an illicit behavior. Like you walk into a police station and you're like, hey, can you help me? I got a flat tire. Hold on, let me get my pot out of the trunk. He's like,
and this bag of money that I just stole from the bank.
And so it's like, yeah, I have to write you a ticket now. Like, I don't want to, I have to. And that's a very different circumstance than like, I am out there doing an illicit behavior and I'm promoting it to others and I'm leading a rallying cry and we're all going to go riot and break into this store. And if it weren't for me, hundreds of people broke in. It's like, yeah, that person needs a different enforcement in this context. So I do think streamers do tend to catch the more public side of it. Also, when they get banned, they publicize it, as opposed to like a non-streamer or content creator.
Right.
They tell their two or three friends they were gonna play with that night. They tell their raid group, and then it kind of stops there. In most cases, we occasionally get something publicized. A while back, there was like an artist that like the community rallied behind, but like you had to realize
there's still
like,
a content creator, like there's still like I was making something like, and that, I mean, again, it's this weird gray area, and I don't think there's anything that like that's just something for discussion that I think is going to have to be an evolving conversation as content creation becomes more and more, I guess bigger in that regards. And Yoshi P even kind of talks about how they're concerned, especially in this article, with them having to step away from Ultimate if it continue, like if the Ultimate mindset continues to be so competitive that people are going through all these different things. Because if them just congratulating people on Twitter, not even being officially involved, is what's driving this hyper competition and driving people to break terms of service and things like that, then it's like he's talking about stepping away. But what I really want to get your perspective on, because you and I've talked about like DPS meters multiple times, and my stance or your stance, unless it's changed since the last time we talked about it, is that DPS meters don't make you toxic. If you're a toxic person, you're going to use a DPS meter in a toxic way. If you're a non-toxic person, you're going to just use it like for self-improvement. And essentially when it comes down to it, like when I think about XIV Analytics, like that's a site that gives me a lot of insight into my performance in terms of numbers and data. And what I think both of us, and I'm speaking for us in this case, but you can correct me just in a second, literally is that I've always said I don't want real-time data. Like honestly, the DPS meter that they have with Act right now bothers me, because I would rather have it something where at the end of the run it tells me how I performed. Did I drop any global cooldowns? Did I have any windows? What kind of damage did I take? What kind of healing? I just want numbers. I want some detail so that I can look and compare myself run over run. Am I improving, or am I getting worse, or did I just kind of stay the same? And then I've seen people make arguments that any kind of numbers is people going to bring in toxicity, to which I always counter, it's already there. They're already using it against you. You're just saying that PlayStation players can't improve, and you want to play on PC or with the PC player if you want to have any hope at competing at that upper echelon. What do you think?
I mean, the tools are in game. You should not need XIV Analytics to know that you're not playing perfectly. But like everybody learns and thinks differently, and so having these tools increases the visibility on how you're playing. So I think on their own they have merit, but they are just tools. And so if you add a hammer store to the game and everybody goes and gets hammers, and then people to the world, and then a handful of people that were going out and dragging innocent bystanders into the alley and beating the crap out of them are now beating the crap out of them with hammers. The answer isn't to outlaw hammers, because what they were doing was already problematic. You already needed to be stopping them from beating the crap out of people. Like, yeah, the hammers makes that worse, but like it was already against the rules on its own. It was already against the rules to be toxic. We have seen people in this community that have been publicized for when they single out. One comes to mind where a particular streamer was mocking the play of another player.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out that the person they were mocking is one of the top parsed players in the world. And then people took that as, we weren't going to criticize your play, but if you think you're so great, let's take a look at your play. And then that player got mocked for the way they played. And then suddenly that player was like, whoa, 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 that's not very nice. And got really hurt that people were being toxic to them when they kind of opened that can of worms. And so like that person was perfectly capable of being toxic without A, realizing they were doing it, and B, being good at the game. Because it turns out they weren't. Like, it turns out they were navigating, you know, they were talking from, you know, more you and my level of play, but the things they were saying were criticizing people from more of like, well, you better be perfect then. So I don't think the damage meters do that. I do think there are systems associated with damage meters that foster toxicity. So how they're implemented would need to matter.
Mm-hmm.
I think live damage meters in real time would cause people to leave duties if they saw DPS was below that. So I think making it like PvP, where you don't get to see people in Crystalline Conflicts rating until, like, the fact that you don't see how other players did until the end of Crystal Conflict or until the end of Frontlines, avoids people leaving when they see somebody that they think is garbage.
I'd even say I don't even care about how other people are performing. Like, just a personalized like feedback metric in that regard. So you could even decentralize it to say like, oh, typically somebody in a Dragoon position does a little bit better. You know, it's
that's what I would want. I would want a relevant point. I would want to know. I ran Pandemonium normal,
mm-hmm.
and they have found that Pandemonium normal for people within 5 item levels plus or minus. Just so that it's a bigger data set. Obviously, the people that are 5+ are going to be doing better than me.
Right.
Are doing 20% more DPS, and that's a number big enough that I'm like, okay, well then something must be critically wrong with it. And then, as one step further, I would love for it to help then educate. I would love for it to be something that either the class or role quest stepped in and better taught my rotation, or it said, you know, one of the biggest sources of this damage, this missing damage, is that you're breaking combos.
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of, you know, maybe a mini tutorial on that says like, you'll notice in your tooltips that it actually says that an ability does 100 potency, and then if you combo into that ability, it does 270. And so like that's where a lot of your missing damage is coming from, is that you're
mm-hmm.
regularly breaking combos. And we found that the average person does break 3 or 4 combos per run, because life is life and you're too busy dodging mechanics. But you're breaking 23 out of 30 combos, and like that's worse. Now, just like when you leave PvP, you can just hit abandon. So like the game's not forcing you to learn or improve. It's just giving you that, because I think there are a group of players out there that are like, I would love to not suck. Right now, not only do I not know how to get better, I don't even know if I do suck.
Right.
I just assume I'm fine.
And then essentially, if you want to improve, you have to violate the terms of service to go and then essentially get access to the tools that will help kind of bridge that gap. And this isn't for everybody, right? Because if you're playing, like we've stated that when you think outside of Savage and up, pretty much all the content is, you know, is basic. Like, you're not going to sit here, like, you miss combos or whatever, you'll still get the clear. The thing you'll notice is how much time it took you that dungeon run versus when everybody knows what they're doing. And that's usually when it's like, oh, that dungeon took 30 minutes. Usually, like, what? That was like a fast run's 9 or 8 minutes, like you're sub 10. And you're like, wow, like that was fun and fast. And we got that knocked out. But then all of a sudden you're like, man, we're seeing some extra phases I haven't seen on this boss in a while. That's the only kind of telling that it comes from experience. And the only way you get that experience is by obviously playing. Now, a counter, or the thing that I would be concerned about, is that when it comes down to the game actually then going above and beyond and saying, hey, here's what you could do, and then people ignoring it, the toxic casual player, like, you know, really could kind of bleed through in terms of like the game literally is showing you in a non-aggressive way, like, hey, do this and make this one change, and then you're still choosing to ignore it. Like, that's when all of a sudden I was like, I'd classify that person as a casual toxic, because go run with trusts. Go play the single player game. Like, I'm not going to judge you for it, but at some point, like in a multiplayer experience, if the game, like this is where when ACT comes into play, it's like, I don't blame anybody because it's not their job, especially if they're on PlayStation, to violate terms of service to go and find this information, right? But if the game all of a sudden did it and they're still choosing to actively ignore, like actively, like, I don't care, I'm just going to keep casting ice, well, then I'm sorry, you're casually toxic. Like, that's where you're entering in a multiplayer experience with the intention of trying to make everybody else's experience worse. And there's a system for that, and it's called trust. Like, as the game offers these opportunities, it's like, go. If you want to play this and just cast Blizzard, there's a pathway for you. Like, we don't have to mingle in that case.
And I think that, like, if this is, if we're staying on DPS meters as the one add-on that, like, I really...
The other add-ons are a tricky subject because they already talked about the graphics improving.
Very specific.
They've already talked, so it's like, they're like... It gets into like, oh, you want this one key feature. He's analyzing. I think DPS meters is like when we talk about the premium, like that is where I think all my attention's focused, because outside the other things, like I think they're going to evaluate them and they're going to see if they can bring them in. Right. That's just where I don't think those are where people are really concerned. Oh no, they added the shaders that we wanted.
Right. And there are people that in chat today, there were people bringing up, well, technically Discord is third party. And it just, this whole, like,
it's not an add-on.
We all know that's not what they're talking about. Like when they start to read into the lines, and like it feels very disingenuous. It feels very. I
wonder in terms of service, like how like Square Enix like aired it, but it's Discord is just like, okay, do you check your mail when you're playing 14? Well, that's a third party app. Like, that's not an add-on. It's not injecting anything into the game.
Well, that's how you're doing your voice chat. It's changing your game experience. And so,
that's true.
There have been people that have been like, well, you said my bedtime is 9 o'clock, and last week you let my brother come home from his basketball game at 9:30. And it's like, okay, well, at some point it's just, then if we're not going to have a good faith conversation, then go to bed. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I don't know what to tell you. And so there is just this.
Sounds like you need a nap.
There is just this point where, like, people are pushing him. I have literally already today seen stream titles of people going, I'm probably going to get banned for my behavior. And like, all I can think is, well, then ban him.
It's a game of attention. Like, and then they grow. And then they grow.
And it incentivizes it. And so I don't really know what this post does. I think it's a good post. I think, it probably did need to be said, but I don't know how it changes because the people who are going to use add-ons already do. So we kind of talked about stream today, and so to kind of pivot this conversation to kind of a last and final subject, what does cause that behavior to change? Because as far as my knowledge goes, the only time I have seen drastic, widespread behavior change in public, because I can't see what people are doing in private, so we have to talk about the public people, was the Fat Black Chocobo campaign. That's the only time I've seen which wasn't meant to change people's behavior. It was meant to take a happy group of players and make them even happier. But it is the only time I've ever seen behavior change, because there was speculation that breaching terms of service on stream could have been a factor in excluding you from the very tiny list. So that's it. So, like, does anything else, can you think, maybe I wasn't thinking enough, but like when we talked it through, that was the only time, in my opinion, that we saw wide scale adoption of not showing ACT on streams, of not promoting ACT on streams. That's it.
Heck, that could be the solution to the problem that we posed at the start of this. Is like, you violate terms of service as a content creator, and we're going to promote somebody else. It's like, oh, it turns out, it's like, here's the diorama. You're within this category of content creator. Turns out we're pushing everybody to this person.
In reality, that wasn't it.
But
that was not a thread that tied together everybody who was not invited.
Well,
it tied together some.
That's the thing with all that, though. But right, that's the thing, though. Like when there's doubt, you speculate, and you can come to a right conclusion, or you can come to the wrong conclusion. More often than not, probably the wrong conclusion, because you don't have all the factors. But in terms of this specifically, like the DPS meter, I think is the key takeaway question and concern. And I think for the longest time, Yoshi P has continued to punt that football. I look at this as kind of a thing of which, like, they've either selectively chosen to enforce, or they haven't enforced, but yet it's still a part of terms of service, so that when, so that they can come back and enforce, as opposed to like, we haven't changed terms, we're just now enforcing it. We've seen this happen when it comes down to how the community guidelines and then them taking that out on stream. I think overall though, with this enforcement itself, that they have to honestly talk to us about DPS meters and a solution that is in game that essentially kind of solves the problem. I think this is hopefully will help them brainstorm a bit. My whole hope is an Overwatch style system at the end of the match. Like, I just want some numbers. I just want some data, because I want to get better. And even when we've run meters, like my wife on my behest, this is years ago, asked that I would run meters on her on PlayStation so that she could get better, because she doesn't want to drag people down. And the thing that helps her is the numbers. Like, it's just like, did you do better this round? There's another Bard in here. We're the same item level. Oh, okay, cool. I'm right in line with them. Like, I'm not like doing less than 20% less or something like that. Because, what am I doing wrong? And that's, and it's those kind of things. Like, it's hard content that invites people, because we're doing that right now in New World. And as kind of a light plug, guys, two things. I'd love to have a clip of Chris's hammer quote for like a future notification pop up on Twitch. I think that's just a funny line. The way he delivered it sounded awesome. I want to hear that again. And then the second thing is I've got my Ginger World channel, which is almost to 1,000 subscribers. So if you like New World, check it out. But the PTR, they added in this 3v3 arena. And what it has done is it forced me to reevaluate my perks, my builds, because all of a sudden I was looking at my damage and what I was doing and how I was performing, and I was like, why am I doing significantly less in this fight? Made a couple changes, boom, I'm top of the list. And it's when the game actually forced me to go and make that change. The game doesn't do that until you get into that hard content, and the people who run that hard content have the tools that essentially kind of fill in the gap. So if you don't break terms of service, you're at a disadvantage. And even if you're not showing it on stream, we know the hard end, high ends do that kind of stuff. So Square Enix, I think, is in a tough position right now. That's just my opinion.
I think that the top end players are familiar with parses. It is possible during Dragon Song's Reprise that they don't need them because they are so ingrained, but they got there by at some point seeing their numbers. And some of them may be console players. You don't so there is this idea that you have to be a console player. If console players are not taking part in this, they just can't upload their own parses.
Yeah, somebody else is doing it for them.
And if you have ever run Savage content with other people, you've probably been parsed. And it's probably been uploaded. Now, it may not be your best run, it may not be your only run, but one of your runs has been uploaded. There has been kind of an argument also surrounding all this is, another point that we haven't talked about is kind of like cheaters, and a lot of that is surrounding Crystal Conflict.
They haven't even addressed it. They haven't even addressed it.
Did not address it, and the cheaters around Crystal Conflict, it wasn't allowed before. It's not allowed now. They are talking about, they're always looking for ways to improve this. They're not going to come out and be super transparent about how they're detecting, because that just tells the cheaters how they're detecting. So, but at some point, hopefully they are addressing it. The one thing that concerned me with what they did say they were addressing is this idea that they are looking to add-ons to implement those features, not looking to feedback, but the fact that they said they're looking at add-ons, because what that does say is people who did add-ons are these wonderful protesters who are leading the charge of change. That the way we get change to UI is it may artificially send a message to that group that by running add-ons, they will then implement those add-ons natively, and it overlooks all of the major and significant UI changes that have come over the years that didn't come through add-ons, that they regularly update the UI period. And that we have, think back to before we had partial search into market board.
Yeah.
Think back to before we had simple job gauges.
I remember when we didn't have market boards. I remember when we had to go retainer to retainer.
So we have so much that is just slowly improved from 2.0 on, that I do think sending a message that we are improving the UI based around this add-on feedback, I think undercuts the message they were sending.
Well, guys, this is, I think, is a real hornet's nest of a mess in my mind. You know, at least right now for the short term, because we know these fixes and changes and updates aren't immediately apparent, and we know that we're getting more ultimates, and we know we got Savage right around the corner again. We know like these other things are happening, and so it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. You can always let us know what your thoughts are here on Discord or over on Twitch. Chris has been streaming Monday through Thursday. I've been kind of handling Friday evenings with the exception of this last weekend, but come hang out, talk to us about Final Fantasy. We'd love to hear you. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and thanks so much for your time. Chris, why don't you take us out?
I'm gonna go get back to covering lore. We're doing something more lore based every other week, and then something more gameplay focused the weeks in between. So enjoying that over on stream. Brian and I think you covered this over on JRPG Gaming, and I have a post that I recorded this morning. They'll be live on Gaming Kinda that goes into more of the detail of the post. If you got to the end of this and you're like, I wish somebody just read through more of the post. So that'll all be covered. So if you made it this far and you're wondering where the post is, that's why. This is not new information. So this is just discussing what really does need
the fallout
to
of the information itself. Yeah.
So and it won't be the last time they post on this. So we will talk about it next time as well. But until then, thank you so much for hanging out. Take care.